What if Jay-Z's real superpower wasn't what we thought it was? My name is Sir Evans, and I'm the Superpower Planner. My key objective is to help overlooked achievers like you tap into your unique superpower and apply it to a purpose-driven plan. One of the things that we just kicked off on this channel is a new series that I like to call What's Their Superpower. We always ask people when we're out and about is, what's your superpower? What is that unique skill that you have, or that gift or ability that you have that no one else has quite the way that you do? 10 foundational superpowers that I have encountered to be the most frequent over my 15 years of experience, whether it's focus, visionary grit, resilience, rooted identity, imagination, perhaps it's a disruptive curiosity, or some of the several others that we unpack in more detail within the book. So we decided to turn this segment into an opportunity where I can take the framework, apply it to some of the most prominent people that we've known, living and passed on, and be able to truly identify what was their unique superpower that is really deeper than the surface level that we often see. My hope is that through this, you'll be able to have a better understanding of your superpower and where it derived from. And I think that it's only fitting that it being December 4th, that we go ahead and wish a happy birthday to Jay-Z, aka Sean Carter, arguably one of the greatest hip-hop artists of all times, and definitely my top 3. Since it's his birthday, December 4th, we want to go ahead and kick this episode off special for Jay-Z. What's his superpower? Born December 4th, 1969, Jay-Z will be turning 56 this year. Wow. Our hip-hop legends are getting up there in age. From the first album, Reasonable Doubt, to 444 being the latest album, 24 Grammys, hip-hop billionaire, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee, Rockefeller Records founder, CEO of Def Jam Recordings, 11 solo #1 albums, recipient of the NAACP President's Award, author of Decoded. What's at the root of all of those? He's creative. He has a way with words. I would argue that none of those things are his superpower. When we think about someone's superpower, it's not what they do, it's how they do it. So a rapper is simply a skill, or it's a title, but it doesn't help us to understand what makes him a good rapper. And that's what we're going to unpack today. From our family, religion, education, experiences that culminate together to give you a unique superpower that your neighbor will never have, your siblings will never have. It is specifically for you. Well, I think that he's already told us several times in his music, and I think it goes in the popular quote of,
I'm focused, man. Tell Stout to holla at me, man.
I'm just saying, yo, stay focused, man.
I believe that Jay-Z's primary superpower is his focus. Let's start at the family dynamic. Grew up with his mother, but he also has siblings, and he's also the youngest of 4. One of the things that I can attest to is that we get to see a lot of the mistakes that our siblings make, whether they're smart decisions, whether they're stupid decisions. We have the opportunity to see you crash and burn, or we have the opportunity to see you set sail for success. And those who are extremely focused take the best notes. There's not a ton of research that goes around Jay-Z's school days, right? It's K through 12 days. We know that he didn't finish high school, which I'm going to connect that I think that also played a part in focus. One of the things too is that our superpower can also be used against us as a weapon if we're not aware. So even when we think about Eli Whitney High School, AZ was a student there as well with Jay-Z. We see him later at George Westinghouse Career Technical Education High School. This is where Biggie was also a student. This is also where Busta Rhymes was at. There's no classes that we hear that he excelled at. There aren't different subjects that we hear that he loved. We don't hear a lot of stories about Jay-Z being this model student. But you know what we do hear is that Jay-Z was a little disruptive in class. He would always beat on the table. There was always beats. There was always have to be a conversation about the distractions that he was making in the class, which supports that there was a lack of focus for the room that he was in. Doesn't mean that he wasn't focused. He just wasn't focused on that particular task. And we'll see throughout his journey where that focus begins to sway. And now there's either problems or there's a shift in the energy. He later leaves school. He's just not focused, but we see that he loved music. There's a story about when Jay-Z was growing up about how his mother bought him a boombox because he wouldn't stop beating on the table. His mother bought him that boombox because he was focused on music. We see even when he had mentors like Jaz-O, who really took Jay-Z underneath his wing. But Jay-Z was like a sponge. Not only was he there, but he was focused. Focus on the cadence, focus on his flow style, focus on the way that you would arrange a song and that delivery. Really getting the fundamentals from an OG that he trusted and that he respected, that he could also absorb game from. He was focused on his craft because that's what he loved. There was focus. What about jobs? That's one of the 6 layers of influence, your career, your job. We don't see Jay-Z with much work history. Actually, I don't think there's any reported jobs that are factual that he had aside from selling crack cocaine, which is a fact that Jay-Z shared and which is well known to most fans. But when we think about what got him into that line of work, this need for finances, this need to make it fast, whether it's for that family dynamic, also whether it's to impress some people that you might want to catch that eye of. There's a lot of flows about where Jay-Z mentioned like all the light-skinned girls wasn't feeling him. But once he started moving the way that he was moving and selling what he was selling, he was now making money and it now attracted them. So instead of making his focus on the females, he made his focus on his money. He made his focus on his illegal career, which we see that throughout the years, one of the things that makes Jay-Z so infamous is how he was able to come through unscathed. Coming up in the inner city of Cleveland, Ohio, we hear these stories every day. And regardless of where you are, I'm sure there's some crime and some drug use in that area. When we think about the ability to have such a long run in that illegal world without catching a felony and without dying, that's some focus and some blessings in there too and some angels on your side. But there's a focus. There has to be an intentional focus on how you're maneuvering, how you're handling clients, how you're moving in and out of the areas, environments, and streets that you're in, especially when we think about the largest city in America being New York. We're not talking about Albuquerque. We're not talking about Idaho. We're talking about square block, the largest population in America. This is where he's operating. So there has to be an intentional focus just to make sure that you're not getting jammed up. But let's throw in one of those examples of how that superpower can work against him. Focus, intentional focus. There's the infamous story about Jay-Z and his brother. Not sure of the exact details. I wasn't there. It's not my business to have been there. But we do know that Jay-Z shot his older brother because his brother was wearing his jewelry, stole it, don't know the details. But at the end of the day, he accidentally shot his older brother. Now, anybody who's shot accidentally, now we don't have to get into the details of it, but there's some lack of focus there. It's a lack of focus. If there was focus, if he was focused, he might not have shot his brother. Somebody could argue he was focused, which is why he shot his brother, but the facts of the matter stated is that this was accidental. So we see where that lack of focus led to his brother being shot. Now, his brother did not die, and his brother did later forgive him. But we want to think about that as an example of where that superpower worked against him when it wasn't sharpened and directed in the right direction. There's another one I want you to stick around for as well. When Jay-Z was first starting out, he went to every record label trying to get a record deal. Nobody would pick him up. This was kind of common back in the day. The Master P was one of the first originators of this, with not taking that first deal that the label gave him and going out there and doing his work and making sure that he could have something that would make his brand worth the juice that was being squeezed. Same thing with Jay-Z. Jay-Z wasn't being picked up by any record label. So what does he do? He focuses on creating his own. Kareem Biggs, Dame Dash, the 3 of them partner up as the perfect trio in order to get this company started, Rockefeller Records, where they can make their own music, set their own terms, and really have their own thing. And that's what he focused on. But even more importantly than that, because he still had Kareem Biggs and Dame Dash, who were also critical parts of the business. There would be no Jay-Z to the level that we see now without someone such as Dame Dash and Kareem Biggs there, because they helped him to focus. They helped Jay-Z to be able to lean into his superpower. Imagine your superpower being focus And now you have to focus on multiple things at once versus being able to isolate what you're focusing on. We saw that in the earlier years of Jay-Z. This is in his career. This is why he was such a brilliant artist, because he was able to focus intentionally on just the craft. Later friction and the demise and the breakup of Rockefeller Records, I believe, once the focus shifted. I believe that there came a point where the business was more exciting to him. But we must also remember, especially for the fans, music was never something that Jay-Z saw doing long term. Even after the release of Reasonable Doubt, Jay-Z already had retirement in his sights.
Yeah, because I heard somewhere that you didn't want to do another record.
Yeah, I mean, even before this, like, you know, the first album, Reasonable Doubt, was supposed to be the first and, you know, the only one.
So it's not far off the reservation for him to want to focus more on the business at some point in time down the road, which is what I believe that what took place, and which is why he shifted from music to the business, and not just the music business, just business in general. I'm not a businessman, I'm a business man. So we see these different examples where now that focus is no longer in the same seat. It's no longer as locked in on music as it once was. And once that focus begins to shift, we start to see change. We start to see some shakeups. We start to see some grounds getting broken. Some relationships start to get tarnished. Now, there might have been some other things behind the scenes, but we're talking strictly superpower. And Jay-Z's superpower was no longer being focused on making the music. He now had it set on bigger ambitions, not only being business, but a family. When Jay-Z and Beyonce, they had been courting for some time, but now we start to see this relationship come together in marriage. Probably one of the most prolific relationships of this generation's time is Jay-Z and Beyonce. But even in the midst of that, what happens when Jay-Z doesn't use his superpower correctly? You see, one of the things that I always tell clients is you have to be mindful of your superpower and you have to be mindful of your kryptonite, because your kryptonite will always fight for your superpower's attention. And if we don't use our superpower to its benefit, then we will use it to our demise. So many people are using their powers, but that doesn't mean that just because you have a superpower that you're a superhero. Power could be used to villainize, and it can also just be squandered on a day-to-day basis. After the Rockefeller breakup, he focused on Roc Nation, but we also saw some other huge lucrative opportunities that required that focus. Uber. This being in a time where Uber was new, there had to be a certain insight and a certain focus on the craft in order to understand and be able to see lucrative opportunity out of that. The biggest one, also aside from that, is Tidal, the streaming service. When we think about Tidal, Jay-Z is the only artist to own a streaming service. The focus that had to go into that in order to see that paradigm shift taking place from CDs going into streaming services and being able to capitalize in that time frame, you got to be focused. Not to mention, Jay-Z was not someone who would pollute his mind to diminish his focus. We don't see Jay-Z as an avid smoker. We don't see Jay-Z as an avid drinker. For the most part, we know of Jay-Z to be someone who has been pretty substance free, which in most cases, substances can cloud your focus. Understanding your kryptonite is probably one of the critical things that has kept his trajectory going up. Let's think about two smaller examples where we don't see that focus being beneficial. Let's think about Kanye West. Jay-Z didn't want to sign Kanye West. Dame Dash did. Looking at this from a superpower perspective, Dame Dash, being in a business seat, has his eyes and focus on talent, while Jay-Z was focused on being an artist. He couldn't focus on the business side of what makes the most sense to bring in a new artist. Especially if you're a rapper. Jay-Z is Jay-Z, and let's keep it honest. Jay-Z calls himself the God MC. He doesn't want any artist to be better than him, and he makes it his duty to be the best that he can. So it doesn't surprise me that his focus didn't allow him to see this up-and-coming artist at the time that it was. However, when he switched to business as his focus, it made a lot more sense to bring in Kanye West. Another example of when we see that superpower working against him is in his marriage. We hear the stories on 444. We also hear it on Beyonce's albums, is the infidelity in the relationship. Infidelity typically occurs when there's a lack of focus, and especially in this situation. The eye is taken off of the prize, being your wife, being that family. And when the focus is diverted, for whatever reason it is, we don't even need the reason in this situation. The focus was now outside of the home. So we saw that superpower abused. We saw kryptonite slip in. And as a result, his focus changed to something outside of the home, leading to infidelity. This is another thing that supports that focus being the core superpower of Jay-Z. But what do I think are his second runner-ups? I believe that Jay-Z's two secondary superpowers, and one of these could be first. I would love to have a conversation. That would be how I would find out. Jay-Z's what are his three primary superpowers? Intentional focus, rooted identity, and visionary grit. When we think about that rooted identity is always having an understanding of who you are. Another one of the superpowers is purposeful presence, and they can often be confused, but the difference between purposeful presence is when you go into a room and your presence just changes the dynamics. It can put everyone in a good mood, put everybody in a bad mood. Rooted identity doesn't always change the impact of the room, but you always know what you bring to the room. You always have an understanding of what your identity is and where it derived from. And I think that is so prevalent because we see this rooted identity rooted in every single album. Jay-Z was able to stay consistent in his artistic field by being rooted in his identity, being true to who he is, being true to where he came from, and not only being rooted in that identity, but being so clearly rooted in it, mixed with the ability of having intentional focus and visionary grit. That's what allowed the stories to be so clear. That's what allowed his stories and his art form to be so vivid and captivating, is being able to stay connected to where he was rooted from. The artists and so much talent that came from the area, the ciphers, the battles, the rhyming, the producers and counters, the beating on the table, the boombox, all of these things were rooted in his identity, and he never lost sight of them, and he always remembered them. I believe that rooted identity is what keeps Jay-Z on an upward trajectory, and I also think it's what keeps him out of a lot of nonsense, because he's seen so many people fall from less. He's seen so many people fall from grace, fall from the levels of success. But so many people around him were staying rooted in who he was and who he is, and how he was able to maneuver even out of the street life without being touched is a testament to, I need to stay rooted in this identity that has always helped and worked for me. And as I continue to grow and stay focused in new environments, I take that focus and I apply it to the understanding that I grew up with, and I can continue to move up. Does it make me perfect? Absolutely not. Of course not. But this allows me to move. We also see that visionary grit really as that goal point, if you will. It's the goal post that keeps Jay-Z moving. When we think about visionary grit, what would keep him beating on the table? What would keep him writing the rhymes and then freestyling, wanting to be better? It was having a vision of something that he wanted to come to fruition. What would make somebody start a record label after being turned down by all of the record labels? It's visionary grit. It's being able to know that you have something that you can offer the world. You can see it clearly. And the grit is being able to say that nothing's going to stand in the way of me achieving what I want to achieve. We see that even with the vision to want to retire before the sophomore album comes out. He's thinking about retirement, that vision. That ability to see 10, 15, 20 years down the path, that's visionary grit. So at the core, what's Jay-Z's superpower? Is it that he's a phenomenal rapper? I personally don't think that Jay-Z's top 3 superpowers, one of them is magnetic communication. I've seen Jay-Z in plenty of interviews. Is he the best interviewer in the world? No, he's not. Is he the best communicator in the world? I'm pretty sure that more people in his circles will say Jay-Z's focus. Jay-Z's a visionary. He has grit. and he's always been rooted in his identity. I guarantee you those would be things that would see more at the forefront than the other superpowers. Now, if somebody in a circle can go ahead and back this up for me, come on and be my guest, because one of the reasons we do this is we have spent over 15 years developing the Superpower Framework, working with students, leaders, activists, entertainers, athletes. I have found the framework that I believe that has been so consistent throughout the years, and is being able to identify that unique superpower by examining your family, your friends, your education, religion, experiences, and work history. It's through those that we get a good snapshot of what is that power that you used in each of these layers, whether you've used it or abused it, because it's also those layers of influence that we apply our superpower to. And our goal is to help you understand that superpower so that you can apply it to a purpose-driven plan instead of blindlessly going through life aiming your superpower in the dark. What do you think a superpower is? You think it's something different? I'd love for you to drop it in the comments. And what do you think your superpower is? Based upon these, I'd love to hear that as well. My name is Sir Evans, and if this video was exciting to you, I want you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the like button. This is how we keep the lights on, and this is also how we make sure that we continue to have the impact in the communities that we've been called to serve. And if there's somebody that you want us to do what's their superpower, go ahead and send them our way. We'll add them to the list. We love to hear your feedback.